Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. So maybe I'll start with an introduction to the course, and then we'll wait for Geshe. Everyone can hear me okay? Okay, great. So my name is Tomer, and I will be the host of this Dharma Friend of Israel course with our teacher, Geshe Kelsang Wangmo, who will teach us on the topic of Buddha nature. So Geshe is known for her profound knowledge and her unique ability to present the most sophisticated subjects in an easy-to-understand manner. She's the first nun to finish the traditional 16 years Geshe study program of the Gulag tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And for many years, she helps in spreading the Dharma through translating His Holiness the Dalai Lama and other High Lamas to German and English, and teaching the Dharma herself to many students, including us here in Dharma Friends. So I'm very excited to host this course. Now, this course is part of a program in our Dharma Friends of Israel, which is called For Buddhism A to Z. And the recording for this course, including as recordings for many other previous courses, can be found in YouTube. So you can go to YouTube and search for the DFI channel, or you can also click the YouTube icon from the Dharma Friends website. Also, I remind you that this meeting is being streamed live to YouTube, so you can see it there, and also, of course, maybe catch it later. If it is possible, I would like to ask you to turn on your camera. It creates a much nicer atmosphere. We can have a class here, really see each other. At the bottom of the internet page of the course page, from which you pressed on the Zoom link, you can find material for this course, and I will also send them via chat. And one last thing is that, as you may already know, all our activities are done by volunteers and financed only by donation, Dana. So if you'd like to practice generosity and donate for the teacher, the course, and the continuation of our activities, you can do so with the PayPal or bank transfer. I will send also the details via chat shortly. And you can also find the details at the middle of the course page on the internet, on the Dharma Friends website. Okay, so I wish us all an interesting and beneficial teaching, and now we shall wait for Geshe to join us and start the teaching. Thank you.
Please give me half an hour. Is that okay? I'm so sorry.
בוקר טוב לכולם. דיברתי עכשיו עם גשי קלסנג וואנגמו, ולצערנו הרב, אני צריכה לדבר באנגלית. Good morning to everyone. I just talked with Geshe Kelsang Wangmo, and unfortunately she had a mistake in time. And she thought it's 2 hours later for some reason. So she's not ready now. She will be ready in half an hour. So I don't know what can we do during this time, but either waiting online or just joining again at 10:30 Israel time, whatever suits you.
And if I may, I can suggest we maybe use this time to meditate until Geshe joins us, right? Unless, Liora, did you want to say something?
Same thing, thank you. So hi, everybody. I'd like to apologize to all of you, especially to Geshe. I'll do it separately. She's not here. Last Sunday, on the Sunday sessions teachings, I announced about this course and I said it will start at 10 o'clock Israeli time and 11 o'clock in Germany. So this is probably my due, my fault. I'm so sorry. And separately, I'll apologize to Geshe. Sorry.
Thank you. Hello. Hello, everyone. I finally made it. Okay, that's great. Yes, okay. Well, suppose we could just start. First of all, I'd like to apologize for my delay. It was my own fault. I miscalculated. I thought the teachings were going to start at 11,
I'm sorry, Geshe-ma, it's my fault. That's what I said last week. So sorry. I've already apologized to everybody. So sorry.
No, I should have thought through it again, and I didn't do that. So anyway, it is what it is. I mean, it didn't help that His Holiness's teachings were earlier this morning, so I had to get up at 2. Didn't fall asleep last night, of course. So it was an interesting morning, and I did manage to lay down a little bit, but not for very long. Fortunately, I woke up actually before I got all your messages, and then I realized my mistake. Anyway, it's what it is. So we can just add half an hour to another part, right, to this course, and I'll start right away. Okay, so I suppose you all have the text on Buddha nature. Yes. I read through it the other day and I was like, how could I write it this way? It's so dry. But anyway, I mean, we won't go through the entire text. We won't have time to do that. And hopefully it becomes more alive, explaining everything, meditating on it. Well, explaining it, discussing it, and then eventually contemplating and meditating on it. All right. So let's start right away. Actually, what I wanted to do, I still want to do, so that'll take a little bit of your time. I want to say just a few words about the introductory prayers that we're going to do together. That is, as I usually start, with some breathing meditation, and you'll know why that is done, why we start with breathing meditation, just to calm the mind, to let go of any disruptive thoughts. And then I would like to guide you through a meditation, a visualization, and I'll say a little bit about that. And eventually we'll do some prayers together. So maybe we leave out the Heart Sutra today, because we don't have that much time. We can do the Heart Sutra maybe tomorrow, and we'll do the other prayers just more extensively. I forget what's on the list, but I believe is Refuge and Bodhicitta. Leora, great. Refuge and Bodhicitta, the 4 immeasurables. And is it also the 7 limbs?
Tomer is the host. Yes, Tomer.
Okay, so all those, right? The ones we usually do before the Sunday class. Okay. All right. So to say just a few words, since this is for Buddhism ABC, this particular group, and I assume there are some of you who are slightly new to these topics, to this way of teaching in particular. So the way we start off is with the development, with the generating of 2 types of minds that are so important to learn the Dharma, in the sense that they're most conducive for getting the most out of this kind of study. Of course, we hear study all the time, study Buddhism. To study Buddhism is really important. Our Tibetan lamas tell us exactly that. And of course, it's so essential to really get an understanding first of the Dharma before we can put it into practice effectively, at least a certain understanding. But when we hear studying, right away, the sense of something academic, and the way we study in the West, the kind of academic studies in the West, and as long as the Dalai Lama says it many times, is very competitive. We study with the type of mind that is ambitious, that is competitive. We want to accumulate knowledge. So the motivation is oftentimes just that. And of course, as humans, we have these natural tendencies to generate these types of mind, but it's also the Western way of life that, of course, even further enhances this kind of competitiveness, this ambition, and so forth. And so, to counteract that, we're still going through the motion of studying, of trying to understand what the Buddha has taught, but at the same time, we do so with a specific type of mind, with the kind of mindset that is most conducive, that helps us to learn the Dharma in a way that becomes effective right away. So what are these states of mind that we generate, that we develop before we start a session such as this? I mean, any session to do with, well, our own practice or with learning the Dharma. There are actually two main states of mind. One is a devotional kind of mind, and one is a mind of compassion, of love and compassion. Those are the two types of awareness that are just so helpful for our own mind, so helpful for ourselves. First, the sense of devotion. What I do as an introduction before we start doing the prayers, before we recite the prayers, I ask the participants, or I'll ask you to visualize the Buddha in the space in front of you. And so to visualize the Buddha in the space in front of you, not just as some kind of image, some kind of mere visualization, but to visualize this being as an embodiment of all the incredible qualities that we associate with the Buddha. If you have a spiritual master, and I'm talking about a spiritual master, not just an ordinary person, but if you feel a connection with someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for instance, or Jadu Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, whoever you have some connection to, and I'm not talking about like you know this person for many, many years and you're in any way very close to them, which is of course hard to imagine, especially with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who's so busy. Well, if you have that connection, just having that mental connection to visualize this image in front of you, the Buddha who you've visualized in the space in front of you, to be inseparable from your Lama, to be inseparable. So it's not even unrealistic, because the way we communicate with the Buddha who's no longer around is through the Lama who's also seen as an embodiment of the qualities of the Buddha. And of course, we're not choosing just an ordinary person, we're really choosing carefully someone who's likely to have, if not the enlightened qualities of a Buddha, but at least the high realizations of a Bodhisattva. So it is through the Lama that we can connect to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And so it makes sense, therefore, to visualize the Lama as inseparable, or the Buddha in front of us as inseparable from the Lama. And that way, through the visualization of the Buddha, we get access to the Lama, and through seeing the Lama as inseparable, we get access to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So it brings the teachings alive through, well, seeing the Buddha, seeing the Lama as an embodiment of everything that was taught. Seeing that it's possible, understanding that it's possible to actually live the Dharma, to embody the Dharma in the form of these great masters. And that comes along with a sense of devotion, with a sense of joy. I mean, what is devotion? We're inspired by this other person, in this case, the Buddha, inseparable from our Lama, or Lamas, if you have more than one Lama. Seeing the Dharma come alive in this person, understanding this is what I can do myself. And this understanding will deepen as you continue to learn the Dharma, that I can become just like them. And that generates a sense of inspiration and joy. So devotion, or this faith and devotion, they're joyful types of mind that calm the mind, and at the same time allow for us to access different areas, or to give us different possibilities. I mean, what we can do with our mind is unbelievable. We have no idea right now what we can attain, what we can accomplish. And especially with this subject we're going to study here, Buddha nature, well, that allows us to get a taste for the possibilities. Our mind has such great potential, and we're just utilizing so little of its countless, abilities. And it's in the form of visualizing this embodiment, all the great qualities we can attain ourselves with this joy and this devotional type of mind, that we open ourselves to everything that we're going to learn and internalize it in a slightly different way. But just this devotional aspect is not sufficient. We need something more. We need a purpose. Why are we doing this? Why are we opening ourselves to this incredible possibility of developing our mind, transforming our mind in a way we would have never thought possible? Well, it's not just for our own benefit, but it's for the benefit, and that's what that's what we're going to focus on next, for the benefit of all sentient beings. Any sentient being we can think of, no matter what form, whether in an animal form or a human form. And in order to generate that kind of motivation, well, we visualize we're surrounded by all sentient beings. Some like to visualize all these sentient beings in the form of humans because we can relate to human beings better. Some find that very unrealistic. They have a hard time with that. So they like to visualize them in the form of humans or animals, whichever form they're in right now. So I leave that up to you, whichever you prefer. But the point is here, first we visualize, having visualized the Buddha in the space in front of us. And sometimes you may add some great masters surrounding the Buddha, but for this course, I don't think that's necessary. So anyway, having visualized this embodiment of all the good qualities we can attain ourselves, then and generate a sense of joy and inspiration, feeling inspired by all the possibilities that this opens to us, that present themselves to us. Then we visualize all sentient beings around us, and based on a feeling of closeness, and I'll say more about it, just the fact that we all want to be happy, we don't want to suffer, and for other reasons, well, we try to generate this sense of closeness towards sentient beings. And in the same way as ordinarily when we become aware of a suffering we have ourselves, and as a result of becoming aware, there's automatically the sense, may I be free from that suffering? Well, we then generate compassion for all sentient beings. Again, the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. So generate great compassion. Then the determination, and great compassion in the sense, the wish for them to be free from suffering, the wish for us to be able to take them away from all their suffering, which then gives rise to the determination to do so. I will do whatever I can to help sentient beings whenever I'm going to be able. I mean, now with my limited possibilities, I'll try harder than before. If I've tried so far, I have done that. And even if I haven't, well, from now on, I will make an effort as much as I can. So to generate that determination and eventually understanding, well, only once I become a Buddha, I can become most effective in doing so. And kind of a meditation that culminates in generating the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta. So those are the two mental states I'd like you to generate. First of all, devotion directed at the Lama, the Buddha. And secondly, the altruistic attitude in the form of bodhicitta. And I believe if you have those two kinds of minds and you're able to hold them, not to let go of them, then your study of the Dharma won't be competitive, it won't be ambitious, it won't be driven by the wish just to gain knowledge, but it'll affect you on a deeper level, and your understanding will be deeper right from the beginning. And when we recite a few prayers, the first two prayers directed at, the first actually, refuge and bodhicitta, directed at the front visualization in the form of taking refuge. And so the first two lines and the next two lines, again, deepening bodhicitta. So it's directed actually at both objects of the visualization. Then we do the four immeasurables. And with the four immeasurables, we deepen this love and concern, this altruistic attitude or this altruistic way of thinking, which kind of deepen that, focusing on the well-being of sentient beings and so forth. And lastly, we do the 7 limb prayers, and that's mainly directed at the Buddha, who's inseparable from the Lama. 7 steps that are extremely beneficial, where the devotional aspect manifests by way of 7 steps, which, well, benefits our mind right now and also in the future, because we generate what's called merit. We accumulate what's called merit, a positive type of energy that is beneficial now and in the future. And starting off with prostrating, so usually in a certain context, well, definitely not online, but when we actually meet, we physically actually bow towards that which we, the Buddha, the Bodhisattvas, often represented on an altar. Now we virtually, if you like, or no, just visualize. We bow to, well, the Buddha, Bodhisattvas, whoever's represented by the Buddha, so our Lama, Bodhisattvas, all represented by the visualization of the Buddha. So we bow as in like we open ourselves to these great beings or the great being in front of us. The second step, so we bow in that sense. The second step is we practice generosity. We visualize that we give. Well, if you've actually set up an altar in your room, then you offer what's on the altar, so the actual offerings on that altar, or you visualize the most beautiful things that you're offering this to well, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, your Lamas, Lama. And thirdly, the third line, it's just 7 lines. So with each line, you perform one of the 7 limbs. So with the third line, you have the opportunity to take a moment and just generate regret, remorse for all the harmful actions you've accumulated. So this is the limb of purification. The first was the limb, I forgot to mention that. So the limb of bowing, of prostrating, of opening ourselves to the great wisdom of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The second was generosity, being given the Dharma by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We give something as whatever we can give, even if we just visualize, give something in the form of these offerings. The third is purification. Having accumulated so much negative potential, as in negative karmic actions, harmful actions that harm others, and in that way mainly harm ourselves. And they obstruct our mind. They obstruct our mind from understanding the Dharma purely, from internalizing the Dharma. And it is through the power of the mind, just generating remorse and reciting this line, that it can have, depending on the strength of our determination, our focus in that moment, that we can actually purify some of these obstructions. And then the fourth step is rejoicing, to sincerely rejoice in all the virtue, in everything positive, especially on a spiritual level, on the accomplishment of ordinary beings, but also of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as a great antidote to any kind of competitiveness, envy, and so forth, which is a huge obstacle to our study and practice of the Dharma. So to really feel joy in what everyone else has accomplished, including ourselves, of course, to rejoice in what we have done, but also what all other beings have done. And then there's the next limb, the limb of requesting the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, are in the form of our Lamas, to remain, to have a long life, request them for a long life, followed by the limb of requesting them to continue to turn the wheel of Dharma, to continue to teach us, to teach the Dharma. And lastly, we dedicate at the very beginning, it's still part of the introductory kind of meditation, we dedicate whatever virtues so far we've accumulated. Okay, so those are the steps I find most effective in generating this devotional type of mind, plus the altruistic, an altruistic state of mind, most conducive for the study. And as you all know, and we'll continue to talk about it. Buddhism is mainly a type of psychology. It's mainly a science of the mind. And everything we learn, everything we do, I mean, even the devotional aspects, they are psychologically extremely beneficial to utilize our mind in the most effective way. And we'll have time to discuss this further. But with this explanation, I hope we can make the most out of this introductory meditation together with the prayers. And well, let's start then. So wherever you are, just gonna set a stopwatch to make sure we don't meditate too long, to have time for class. All right, now let's start with about a minute of just watching the breath. So mindfulness of breathing, to let go of any disruptive thoughts and to be fully focused on what is to come. So with a very calm mind, visualize in the space in front of you. Not too big, not too small. Visualize the Buddha who appears in the form of an ordained monk. Wearing the saffron robes. Seated on a large lotus flower, on top of which are a sun disk, and on top of that a moon disk. His left hand, the Buddha holds a begging bowl. With his right hand, he touches the ground underneath, that is the moon disk. He touches it, the tip of his fingers. The earth touching gesture. With his body made of light, of radiant, pure light. Yet appearing very clearly to our mind. And of course, appearing as the embodiment of all the wonderful qualities a living being can attain. And remember that the Buddha is an embodiment of your Passenger Lama, inseparable from your Lama. And he's representative, he's a representation of all the other bodhisattvas, Buddhas. Of all the great qualities that they've attained. At the same time, he's also symbolic for all the qualities we ourselves can attain. Try to generate this deep sense of joy, having encountered such wonderful being in the form of our Lama and other masters. And then visualize surrounding you are all sentient beings. As if you were sitting on a hill and all around you are sentient beings, filling the horizon in all directions. Experiencing endless sufferings, mental pain, physical pain, fear and anxiety. Grief, depression, as a result of different afflictive emotions. which are all caused by a basic misapprehension. That all sentient beings, including ourselves, are carrying in our mind. And remember, we're all the same. And simply wanting to be happy and not wanting to experience problems, pain, and other sufferings. Despite that, we're all afflicted by ignorance or the basic misapprehension that misperceives the way phenomena really exist. So based on that, first generate what's called affectionate love. That is a deep affection towards all sentient beings. Considering them to be endearing, lovable, based on a sense of closeness and acceptance, whoever they are. And then consider the incredible suffering that sentient beings go through, experiencing endless problems, encountering situations that are unwanted, suffering sickness, loss, and other external and internal problems. No matter how happy someone seems at the outset, from the outside, as long as we're afflicted by ignorance, we cannot be truly and lastingly happy. So based on that, first generate the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. And then the wish to help all sentient beings become free from their suffering. And that way generate great compassion. And that wish then turns into a determination to help all sentient beings to free themselves from suffering. Just the altruistic attitude. And lastly, based on the understanding that we can only be fully effective in fulfilling that determination if we become a Buddha ourselves. Let's generate a mind of enlightenment, the wish to become fully enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so now as we recite the prayers, try to hold on to this mind. The devotional mind directed at the Buddha and, most importantly, bodhicitta. The wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. While at the same time being fully focused on the meaning of the words we'll recite now. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharmas, and the Supreme Assembly. By the positive accumulation I gather by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the positive accumulation I gather by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the positive accumulation I gather by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. And then the four immeasurable thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And then for the 7 limbs, focus mainly on the Buddha in the space in front of you, representing your personal Lama, as well as all the other great beings, other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I confess all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time. And rejoice in the virtues of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until cyclic existence ends. And turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate all the virtues of myself and others to the great enlightenment. Okay, so that was a slightly longer introduction, but just to emphasize the importance of not just studying the Dharma with the usual type of mind, just because we make it so much more effective in the way I described before, with this kind of attitude that I described before. But let's go right into the text. Okay. All right, there it is. So this text is actually a collection of different explanations that we went through when we studied about Buddha nature, taking it from different texts, and many of them you're not familiar with, but that's okay. Some of them you are familiar with, some of them you may not be familiar with, but the way we studied this particular topic as part of the formal studies that I went through, well, all the different aspects are put together in this booklet, and it is pretty dry, but then it's the purpose of all this is just to present the facts and to, well, in the form in which we have come together here, to bring it, to make it more alive, if you like. All right, now I won't read everything, I won't go through everything, but just some of the more important parts. So as you know, the topic is Buddha nature. It's already a term that is unusual. It's not a term we would ordinarily use in everyday language. Well, nature, surely we use that word. Buddha we've had, but Buddha nature, I mean, it's not even a literal translation of the Tibetan word, but this is the term that's been used. And so, well, to start right with the text, it's the topic of this particular topic that we're studying here is part of a text from Maitreya called Abhisamaya Alankar, a text His Holiness the Dalai Lama mentions frequently when he talks about the different texts he himself has studied as part of His Holiness's formal education. And it's based on a particular commentary. So Maitreya was a great Indian master, and then Benjamin Dakpa is one of the commentators. He composed a commentary on this text by Maitreya, and he was Tibetan. He was a great Tibetan master. Anyway, all the information given here is mainly based on Maitreya and Benjamin Dakpa's commentaries, with certain quotes also from other masters. Anyway, so having said this, now, what is this term Buddha nature? I mean, what is that word? That's one of the difficulties, as you're probably aware, of studying the Dharma. The first obstacle is these strange words. But I guess no matter what discipline you study, whether it's, I don't know, computer science or physics, I mean, the first difficulty is always learning new terminology. Well, we need terms for ideas that are new to us. And in Buddhism, of course, there are ideas such as, well, Buddha nature. And, well, they're based on the Sanskrit term originally and then translated into Tibetan. And now we use English words equivalent to, well, the Sanskrit and the Tibetan. The first word, Sugata Garba, or in Tibetan, Deshingnimu, that's one word for Buddha nature, saying the essence of a Buddha. So the essence of the one gone to bliss. This kind of name for Buddha. There's so many different epithets. I think they're called like names. We talk about the Buddha, the enlightened one, the blessed one, the Bhagavan, or the one gone to bliss, not just to joy and happiness, but to the greatest state of happiness, that is bliss. So here, that's a literal translation of Sanskrit or the Tibetan words. The essence of a Buddha. So we all have the essence of a Buddha. And then next is the essence of the one thus gone. The Buddha is also described as the one thus gone beyond the ordinary, gone beyond the afflictive emotions, the misapprehensions, and so forth. Those two terms are used, but not very often. And then there is the word that is used the most, Gotra in Sanskrit, or in Tibetan, Rik. So in Tibetan, that word is used the most. And it has so many different meanings: affinity, lineage, family, class, type, species, status, nature, potential, and so forth. So depending on the context. However, when talking about Buddha nature, that is in Tibetan, Sangye Rik, Buddha Gotra, or in English, wild Buddha nature, in that context is described as nature. So we all have the nature, the type, the species. We're the species of a Buddha, if you like. So in that sense, we all have something in common with the Buddha, if you like. So we have something that the Buddha possesses, an essence that the Buddha possesses, and we possess ourselves, without which we couldn't become Buddhas, we couldn't become enlightened. And then the last word is Dhatu, come in Tibetan. And then element, constituent, that's also like the Buddha element. Anyway, the words are not that important, but you may come across different terms, which is why they're often mentioned at the beginning, the different words for this particular concept. Anyway, so now I'll kind of half read and half explain, or just explain the text. here it says again that it's the Tibetan, for instance, Sangye Girik or Buddha Gotra. That's how we came to the term in English, Buddha nature. So what is Buddha nature? In general, it is something that every living being has. Every living being possesses, well, every sentient being, as long as you're not enlightened, you talk about it in the sense of having a potential, something that we all possess that enables us to become Buddhas. But it's explained slightly differently in different scriptures. So you have different philosophical systems, with the so-called lower systems being like a stepping stone to the higher systems. And we'll go through their explanations just briefly, because it helps us to understand the highest view with regard to what Buddha nature is. So basically, well, in what way is that, of course, relevant to us? And that's always important. Sometimes it's hard to do this, to kind of draw this connection, to connect what we learn about the Buddha Dharma, connect that to our everyday life. And that's initially particularly hard. And as you become more familiar with the Dharma, studying it, contemplating it, becomes more and more obvious how it can, this understanding here, or what we learn here, how it can benefit us on a daily basis. This touches the fact, and I've briefly mentioned it in the beginning, that right now we have not fully tapped into the potential of our own mind. We have not fully utilized our mind, in the sense that there's so much we can do with it. We're actually limiting ourselves through our close-mindedness, our wrong views, of course, but also our inability to go beyond what we can do right now. I mean, we can learn certain things. Of course, we went to school, we learned certain things. So from being not able to read and write, we learned how to read and write. We've learned a lot. I mean, it just shows the capacity of the mind to learn. And that capacity continues up to a very high age. It doesn't matter how old we are, and science supports that our brain can change. And well, Buddhism focuses less on the brain, more on the mind. But if the brain changes, well, the mind changes. The mind can always change, and change in the sense of enhance. It can transform. But like I said before, transform in ways which right now seem pretty impossible. We can generate qualities such as love and compassion that, from a Buddhist point of view, become endless. So there's no limit to the love and compassion we can experience. So there's just some of the examples of the positive qualities we can develop. And the side effect, if you like, the side effect of these qualities is that they lead to incredible happiness and well-being, bliss. So the Buddha is someone who experiences the highest state of happiness because these qualities have been perfected to the degree, well, his or her mind has transformed in such a way that the fullest potential has been actualized of the mind of any living being. So in the case of a Buddha has actualized his or her fullest potential. And we have that same capacity, but that needs to be explained. How do we have this capacity? What is it about us that shows we have that same ability? So this will be explained here. It's explained here mainly based on the sutras, of course, based on what the Buddha himself said, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras very simply actually describe two types of Buddha nature, two types. One that's called the naturally abiding Buddha nature, and the second is called evolving Buddha nature. That makes things a little bit more complicated, but there's no contradiction in those two aspects. So there's two things we possess, two phenomena, two things we all have, which account for the fact we can all become enlightened. We can move beyond this ordinary state that we're in right now to attain the state of a Buddha. Okay, now, naturally abiding, evolving Buddha nature. Again, those are pretty much literal translations, at least from the Tibetan, but from the Sanskrit actually as well. So of the two, what is this naturally abiding Buddha nature? Why naturally abiding? Because it's always there. It's always there. Naturally abiding Buddha nature, in the sense that particular Buddha nature doesn't change. It's permanent. And it's described as the main Buddha nature. It's a little hard to put our finger on it, because actually it refers to the emptiness or the final nature of our mental consciousness. Our mental consciousness. Now, you're all aware we have sense consciousnesses and we have mental consciousness. And mental consciousness, that is where everything revolves around when we talk about Buddhist practice. I mean, it is the mind that learns the Dharma. It is the mind that studies, learns the Dharma. It is the mind that reflects on the Dharma. It's the mind that meditates on the Dharma. But it's also the mind that worries. It's also the mind that constantly thinks about things, experiences fear, and so forth. The sense consciousnesses are, of course, providing us with all the information we need, but it's the mental consciousness. It's the most important aspect of ourselves, mental consciousness. The stream of awareness that is always there, always. So even when we say we're unconscious, well, we're never really unconscious. We're just not conscious when we arise from that state of being unconscious. We're not conscious that we were conscious. But even when when we fainted, when we're asleep, even when we're dying, there's always a mind. And that mind is always doing what the mind always does. It experiences something, some object. Now, of course, if you study the Dharma, this will be emphasized a lot. It will be explained again and again. I don't need to say that much about it. But the point is that, therefore, our mental consciousness is really the center of everything. But this mental consciousness exists in a certain way in which other phenomena exist too. Exists in a way that it is dependent on countless other phenomena, dependent on many, many other phenomena, and does not exist in and of itself. Now, many of you know already what I'm talking about. Just for those who don't, the way phenomena, the things that we experience on a daily basis, the way they appear to us, they appear in a way as if everything that we see existed very concrete. So concrete that it seems you could, if you could hypothetically remove everything else around it, remove even our own mind that experiences this object, that the object can continue to exist in exactly the same way. That it actually, if you could magically remove all the background, everything that surrounds this object, and if magically you could remove your own mind, the observing mind, if you removed all that, the object would continue to exist. It's so self-sufficient. It seems that phenomena, it seems to us, yeah, they can temporarily interact, but they are self-sufficient. They're autonomous kind of phenomena in that it's by their own nature. They're a table, they're a chair, and so forth. They don't need anything further. Now, from a Buddhist point of view, that's a huge misapprehension. Nothing can exist in this way. Everything is, first of all, dependent on an external level. If you take the external objects, the external forms and colors and so forth, they're dependent on so many other factors around them, causes, conditions, of course, to give rise to them, and then the parts that are made of, parts, endless parts that they're made of. And of course, on an even subtler level, on the mind. If there wasn't consciousness, if there wasn't mind, there wouldn't be any objects. So when we say reality, what is reality? What is the reality we perceive? Well, there's my reality, and then there's the reality of each and every living being. And what I perceive is different to what everyone else perceives. And so it is my mind that is responsible for the objects that I perceive. We believe kind of it's the other way around, that the objects are there and therefore I perceive them. But they actually only exist because there's the mind and it perceives them. So because there's mind, because there's the mind that experiences certain things and then categorizes phenomena, puts them into categories. This is a chair, this is a table, and so forth, kind of designates and labels them in that way, having thoughts, table, chair, etc., that these phenomena become tables, chair, and so forth. So in and of themselves, there's nothing, there's no chair that's in and of themselves, in and of itself, actually a chair, and so forth. Well, what I just explained, if you're new to it, it'll be very confusing. If you've heard already about it before, it may still be confusing, especially after what I said. But what I'm trying to say here mainly is that the phenomena around us don't exist the way they appear to us. They exist in an interdependent fashion, not as solidly and concrete as they appear. And that is also true for our mental consciousness. Mental consciousness, I started off, I've said, everything in our life revolves around our mental consciousness. So who we are, it defines us as who we are. It determines whether we're happy or not, and so forth. And this mental consciousness, that mind, is the mind that eventually transforms, in that it removes that which is in the way to us becoming a Buddha. And naturally abiding Buddha nature is just saying it is the final nature, the actual nature of this mind, the lack of any kind of inherent, of any kind of independent existence. That is also Buddha nature, in that also, I'm saying also because it's the mental consciousness itself that is described as Buddha nature, and its final nature of lacking this inherent independent existence. Both are seen as Buddha nature. If we start off with the mental consciousness itself, well, if you learn enough about Buddhism, it becomes clear that, and I said it just a few moments ago, well, that it's our mental consciousness. That's the one thing that transforms. That's the one thing we can actually learn to control of all the other things in the world. Externally, there's very little we can really, truly control, maybe for some time. But if we check further, it's actually all beyond our control. The one thing we can really learn to control, not even our body, we can learn to control to such a degree, or to the same degree as we can learn to control our mental consciousness. And it's that mental consciousness that is utilized when we practice the Dharma, and it's that which turns into the mind of a Buddha. And if the mental consciousness is transformed into the mind of a Buddha, the person who has that mental consciousness is by definition a Buddha. So really, being an ordinary person, being a Buddha, it all comes down to the mental consciousness. However, so therefore, it's the mental consciousness that, having a mental consciousness that allows you to become enlightened. That's Buddha nature, in the sense that what is it you need? What is the ingredient you need to become a Buddha? Mental consciousness. Simple as that. Because a mental consciousness by its nature, such that it can transform and become an enlightened mind, an awakened mind. So we have everything. We don't need anything other than our mental consciousness. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. That's the main ingredient. That's the main ingredient. Of course, we need other things. It's not like the mental consciousness exists totally independent, but that's the main ingredient. And now what we need to do is to remove what's extra in our mind. Buddhahood is not so much about gaining new things, although we talk along these lines, gaining new qualities. But really, what it really is removing certain aspects of the mind that are not even in the nature of the mind. They're not supposed to be there. And removing these aspects, we remove the causes for suffering, and we remove whatever is in the way to become awakened. So removing the obstructions to enlightenment, that's how it's usually expressed. And once we've removed all that which is extra, then qualities such as love, compassion, altruism, they'll naturally evolve. Initially, we start meditate on them to help for these qualities to come through, to be able to kind of push through the afflicted states that are in the way for their actual development. So therefore, mental consciousness is described as Buddha nature, actually evolving Buddha nature. Evolving Buddha nature, why? Because it evolves. This mind is changing. It's an impermanent phenomenon that needs to be transformed in order to become a Buddha. But it's only possible because our mental consciousness exists in a certain way. It doesn't exist the way it may appear to us. When our mental consciousness appears, it appears to exist as an independent entity, as intrinsically existent. No, it doesn't exist in that way, which is why this fact that the mind doesn't exist that way, that the mind lacks inherent existence, that the mental consciousness is empty of inherent existence. So that is the second type of Buddha nature, the naturally evolving Buddha nature. And that's what it says here. That the mental consciousness is the main factor that facilitates the development and transformation of the mind. The fact that our mind is empty makes it possible for the mind to change. If our mind were to exist the way it appeared to us as something concrete and independently, well, it couldn't change. It can only change. Change is only possible in interaction with other phenomena. And if something exists independently, if it exists inherently, if it were to exist inherently, it would exist independently. So it wouldn't be able to interact with other phenomena, and it couldn't change. It will always remain the same. Therefore, what facilitates the development and transformation of our mind? Its lack of inherent existence. So here it says, without that, the mind couldn't change. And if our mind didn't lack inherent existence, it could not gradually be freed from afflictive and cognitive obstructions. So afflictive obstructions are all the obstructions that keep us from becoming liberated. And then the cognitive obstructions are those obstructions that keep us from becoming a Buddha. So there are these two goals: to liberate ourselves from the state we're in right now, where we have afflictive emotions, we have anger, attachment, and so forth, craving, etc. So removing those first, we become liberated through removing the root cause of those, which is the misapprehension of reality. Once we remove that, we remove all the other afflictive emotions, and that way remove suffering and attain what's called liberation. But there's still something left on the mind, even when we become liberated, that obstructs the mind to fully know things, because that's the actual nature of our mental consciousness, to just know things. But it's obstructed by what are called the residues of the obstructions that keep us from liberation. So even if these obstructions to liberation were removed, these residues or imprints are still there, and they need to be removed in order to become fully enlightened. So what this is saying here, or the text is saying, the fact that we have this mental consciousness and our mental consciousness lacks inherent existence, that enables us to remove all the obstructions and therefore to become enlightened, which is why naturally abiding Buddha nature and evolving Buddha nature are the two types of Buddha nature. All right. And then you have this whole explanation that, well, this is maybe too complicated for this particular course. It talks more about the qualities of a Buddha, saying explaining us that the mind of a Buddha, our ordinary mind, that is Buddha nature, the mind, the mental consciousness, which is Buddha nature, it becomes the mind of a Buddha. So it transforms into the mind of a Buddha. And of course, the emptiness of our mind right now, that lack of inherent existence of our mind right now, the lack of inherent existence of our mental consciousness right now, turns into the lack of inherent existence of the mental consciousness of a Buddha. So it turns into this idea of transforming into, just as you have, let's say, a river. If you compare the mind, your mental consciousness, to a river that's flowing through a land, through a country, in the same way, our mental consciousness flows. It's like a stream that flows through life, changing all the time, experiencing different objects. And just as such a river may be polluted by all sorts of pollutants, I don't know, man-made, natural pollutants, and so forth. In the same way, our mind is also polluted by innate kind of obstructions, as well as by intellectually acquired obstructions that we acquired in this very life. And just as the river flows through different areas, our mind experiences different objects, has different experiences, and so forth. And just as this river can be purified, because the nature of the water is such that it is clear, it's H2O, that's the actual nature of water, and the obstructions, that which is in the water, that's the pollutants, they're not in its nature. They can actually be separated from the H2O. In the same way, our mind is such that whatever is part of the mind, and think your own mind right now, whatever obstructions there are in your mind, whatever problems you identify in your own mind, sadness and fear and worry and anger, and there's like this huge amount of like different aspects that make us miserable. We don't want them to be there. Well, they can all be removed. It's possible to totally remove them. And what I said earlier on was, well, think, in what way can this be relevant to your own life just now? I mean, forget about Buddhahood. I mean, not totally forgetting about it, but even if it's not our main focus, and let's be honest, it's not like hard to think. We wake up in the morning and the first thing on our mind is Buddhahood. It's probably not the first thing on mind. I mean, it'd be great if it were. And I'm sure His Holiness the Dalai Lama's, when he wakes up first thing in the morning, is definitely Buddhahood, all sentient beings, and so forth. But we're trying, at least through our meditation, to do so. But yeah, to be realistic, it's probably not the first thing on our mind. There's other things, other worries we have. But learning about Buddha nature, learning about that, just shows us in our daily life, well, in terms of developing our mind, the sky is the limit. In other words, there is no limit. It can give us an incredible self-confidence that it doesn't matter how much it feels like we're stuck in certain behavioral patterns. Yes, we are stuck. And sometimes it feels like we're turning in a circle. And it is oftentimes like that old behavioral patterns, they reappear. And we thought maybe they actually became weaker, but then they re-arise again and they're stronger than before. And it really takes time. It definitely takes time. But any kind of negative habits that we have, they're exactly that, habits. We familiarized with certain types of mind over time. And anything that we familiarized with, we can defamiliarize with. Why? Again, because of the nature of our mind, because of our Buddha nature, because of naturally abiding Buddha nature and evolving Buddha nature. And when you learn this and when you internalize this, you come to a point where the sense of frustration, oh, I won't change, or I'll always be the same, that's not true. That's not true. Yeah, there's similarities and certain behavioral patterns, because we reinforce them. Sometimes subconsciously we reinforce them. That's why they reappear. But if we apply the antidotes again and again, first antidote, of course, is mindfulness. Become aware. What is going on in my mind? How often do I reinforce this negative habit? How often do I allow my anger just to run wild, my envy, my attachment? To as his homeless this morning talked about the Satipatthana Sutra, or Satipatthana Sutta in the sense of talking about mindfulness. That is, of course, the foundation. We've heard this morning, one of the person asking a question cited a part of the Satipatthana Sutta, that this is the only path, in the sense that all Buddhist practice, what is underlying, it's mindfulness. It's mindfulness. So it starts off with becoming mindful, with becoming aware of our own mind, how all the negative components that are part of our mind are there because of constant reinforcement, of constantly reinforcing them, strengthening them over and over again. And when we become so mindful, and we are able to stop the mind in that process of again and again enforcing these negative habits, they'll disappear. There is no way they can remain, because they need reinforcement, since they're not in the nature of our own mind. The nature of our own mind. So mental consciousness is totally pure. It's totally pure. It's this purity that, as I said before, allows us to become enlightened, and because allows us to become a Buddha, and because our mind doesn't exist inherently, those changes can take place. So this is what I want you to understand, but also for your daily life. So in the long term, and I know the session is almost over, we've only had a meditation at the very beginning, which was really long. So no need to have another session as part of this first session. But to summarize, I want you to just want to summarize. I don't want to bombard you with all this information. And we'll have time for the bombardment at a later time. No, but what I've been saying this morning is this. Mental consciousness is the center of Buddhist practice, of Buddhist study, and so forth. So mental consciousness is also what we call Buddha nature, that essence. It is that which goes beyond. It is that which leads to this lasting happiness in the form of becoming enlightened. It is that nature, that type that we have in common with the Buddha. It's that constituent, that element that allows us to awaken. It's that mental consciousness, that stream that's like a water stream, that in the same way as the water stream can be purified from any kind of pollutant, in the same way our mind can be purified from any kind of negative habits in the form of, the afflictive emotions, but most importantly, the basic misapprehension of reality, of not understanding how phenomena really exist. That is what eventually needs to be eliminated. And once you eliminate that, you can eliminate all the pollutants of the mind, all the afflictions of the mind, and attain the state of a Buddha. So, having said that, what I want you to take from this is also to, based on that, learn to develop the self-confidence that no matter how much you feel like you're turning in a circle, you're never changing, it's only a matter of being mindful and making sure we're not reinforcing old habits, but instead replace them with positive habits. And as Shantideva so wisely said, there's nothing that doesn't become easier through familiarity. That has to really become part of your whole essence. So not just to understand this intellectually, that in every situation when you're frustrated with your own mind, you go back to that. Yes, my mind is acting up. There is this fear again. There's this frustration again, but it's changeable. It is changeable. And over time, you'll notice if you really stick to it, stick to the different psychological techniques that are set forth here, well, sooner or later, you can look back and go, I've really changed. Things are different. I'm more peaceful. I'm more at ease. I'm more resilient. I'm better able to deal with the challenges of everyday life. And like I said, Buddha nature helps us to get in that self-confidence that change is possible. And over time, you'll see for yourself. All right. So this is how I hope that, and this is the way in which hopefully becomes clear in what way Buddha nature can help us. This understanding can help us in our daily life. Anyway, just to continue a little bit more, the parts of page 4, the first paragraph and the last paragraph of the previous page, well, they talk about how Buddha nature transforms into the quality of a Buddha. You can read this at your own time. But now there'll be a more extensive explanation of these two types of Buddha nature. It follows from now on. And we start with a more general explanation. There are 13 types of Buddha nature, which eventually will be mentioned. But most importantly, is the explanation that follows here. You see there are some sutric passages. So just to show that also the Buddha, of course, mentions Buddha nature. So here, of course, the whole sutra cannot be cited. And it's just kind of short paragraphs, and they don't necessarily seem to be saying here Venerable Subhuti asked the victorious, asked the Buddha, and so forth on page 5. It doesn't, these words don't seem to really express Buddha nature, but if you read the entire text, if you read the entire sutra, those are part of the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, then it becomes clear that they actually set forth Buddha nature. So here it says like, the meaning of the term bodhisattva, that it has no meaning. If one were to ask why, is the Buddha is not perceived to be born or to exist or to be non-existent. He's talking about the emptiness, the lack of inherent existence, even of the mind of a Buddha, our own mind, and again, which makes it possible, which enables us to become enlightened. Then it's like a track of a bird in the sky. So this briefly indicates the nature of Buddha nature. It's not something we can perceive. It's like a track of a bird in the sky, and so forth. Anyway, I don't need to read all this. This is just the general information. But what is important then, the explanation after this short introduction that is relevant is now on page 6. Here, the authors, what they describe is Buddha nature as it's set forth in the different philosophical schools. Now, this seems at first just making things more complicated, and actually we're trying to gain a clearer understanding of what Buddha nature is, but it can be helpful because it's like I said it earlier on, it's like a stepping stone. It kind of takes us step by step to a deeper understanding of what Buddha nature is. And the explanation that are given here, they're not necessarily contradictory, they just add some information. Now, the way Buddhism is studied, in particular in the Sanskrit tradition, in the Tibetan Buddhist or Sanskrit tradition, is such that we study some of the lower philosophical schools because their explanations prepare our mind for deeper and more difficult explanations. And so we'll do exactly that. We've got 2 minutes left now. I wonder if there's a question. If there's any of you who has a question after this long explanation, you could raise your virtual hand. And in that way, I know if you have a question. You can always post questions also in the chat, and then I'll read them as we go along. No questions? Okay. All right. Well, I've got a minute left. Now, this text that I'm following by Benjamin Tsongkhapa, this great great Tibetan master, well, he explains fast Buddha nature according to what's called the Vaibhashika in the Sautantrika school. So the way these other schools, the Buddha also taught them, but like I said, he taught them as an introduction to this idea of Buddha nature from the point of view of the highest philosophical school. He taught this in preparation, so to just make our mind more flexible. It's more graspable in a way, to explain it first from the point of view of the Vaibhashika and Sautantrika. It makes it a little bit easier to grasp this idea. And anyway, in the Vaibhashika and Sautantrika, they don't talk about becoming Buddhas. So when we first encounter the Dharma, it seems overwhelming, all this Buddha talk. We don't even know what a Buddha is. I mean, the person, Buddha Shakyamuni, well, if we were to meet this person, if we met the Buddha right now, depending on the obstructions in our mind, we wouldn't be aware that this was a Buddha. That is, again, our mental consciousness reflects reality for us, in that the more obstructed our mind is, the less we can actually perceive the beings around us. I mean, even if it was the Buddha himself, we were surrounded by Buddhas, we would see them as ordinary. We would see them as a reflection of our own mind. So therefore, when we first learn about the Dharma, not talking so much about Buddhahood may be helpful. So this is reflected by the Vaibhashika and the Sautantrika school. First, what is Buddha nature? Well, the word is not even used. It's the word Arya nature. So the sutras that teach Vaibhashika and Sautantrika tenets explain Arya nature to have 4 aspects. So it's the potential that we all have, that we're satisfied with little things. So someone having Arya nature or not, according to the Vaibhashika and the Sautantrika, having this potential, well, there are 4 aspects. And here, according to the Vaibhashika and the Sautantrika, they would say, no, everyone has Buddha nature. Not everyone has Buddha nature. This is also quite different. And it reflects more the way we think. We look at some people and think, no way they have Buddha nature. They're just totally ordinary. So for us, it's much more difficult to grasp that everyone has the potential to become a Buddha. Now, in the visualization we did earlier on, we emphasized this a lot. But honestly, when we walk through life and we meet certain people, I guess it's difficult to get a sense they also can become enlightened. After a while, that will change, but initially it's difficult. And like I said, the Vaibhashika and the Sautantrika, when we learn their type of Buddha nature, or the kind of ability to transform as they describe it, well, it actually refers to only some people, to some beings. Okay, but that should be enough, because I'm seeing, I see it's, 11 o'clock where I am, 10 o'clock where you are, or no, 12 o'clock where you are, right? Okay. All right, so let's take a break. We've got half an hour break, and I'll see you again at 12:30. Is that right? Okay, great. So let's take a moment to dedicate whatever virtue we've accumulated here together, whatever positive potential we've accumulated. May it benefit us. May it help us to utilize our mental consciousness in such a way that we are able to transform it and eventually attain the enlightened state of a Buddha. Not just for our own welfare, but for the welfare of all sentient beings. Okay, thank you. So let's meet at 12:35 to be fair. So you have your half an hour break. get up, move around a little bit, and then we'll meet exactly in half an hour. See you soon.